Welcome back to the latest edition of the Audible presented by Trader Joe's Stew. It is a live edition. We're
You're
doing this
looking
Sunday.
live
We
at
are.
our offices.
It is Sunday morning, and we had a very, very interesting week one so far. A bunch of huge games, a bunch of interesting responses, and how things played out from teams. We're going to get into our stuff you should probably be freaked out about if you're a fan of a certain team, and stuff you probably should remember. Hey, it's a long season. We're not going to worry. We're not going to overreact too much to this. But before we get into some of that, you're home, not in Columbus, Ohio. What gives?
Yeah, it was a crazy 11th hour, and 11th hour was even putting it mildly. 15 minutes before the Uber was going to come on Friday morning to go to the airport. There's just been everybody in my house has been sick this week, and it hit me. I do feel better now, but yeah, I had to make a split-second decision. Am I gonna try to power through this? We had 3 other people there, so it wasn't essential that I go. I did obviously, turn on the TV Saturday and wish I could have been there, but also, Bruce, like, if I had been there, I would have missed all of Alabama, Florida State. We talked about this before. When you're writing something like Final Thoughts that covers the whole sport or the whole weekend, it's actually harder to do that when you're at a game.
Yeah, so we're going to get into all of these things, and one of the things that I think is an interesting way to format this, especially week one, because look, no sport I feel like is more guilty of overreacting to stuff than our sport, and the media that covers it, same deal. Fans freak out, and what we learned, especially we're reminded of last year. Look who won the national title. Ohio State did. Not only did they lose to Oregon, albeit in a close game at midseason, but they lost to their arch rival, and at the end of the regular season, and it felt like the sky was falling in Columbus around Ryan Day, and they ended up bouncing back and winning the national title. So what I thought was a way to kind of segment this was three categories. One, the thing that you're like, I'm not stressing about this at all. I know it happened yesterday. I saw it with my own eyes, but like, if I was a fan of that team, or if this was one of my preseason picks, not worried about it. Category 2, you know what? That gives me a little bit of pause. I am genuinely worried about this. In category 3, if I was a fan of this team, I think there's reason to be really panicked.
Yeah.
So let's start with the first category. The things where you're kind of brushing off and being like, hey, let's not be doomsayers over this. It's early. What's your call on this one?
The big LSU Clemson game, obviously. It was a great game. I think we were really impressed with both teams' defenses. There was a little bit of concern coming out of that about, well, Clemson lost to an SEC team again, right? Like, same old, same old. Cade Klubnik didn't, put up big numbers and whatnot. I thought this was a much different Clemson team than we've seen the past few seasons. I thought, you think back to that Georgia game at the beginning of last year where they got totally outclassed. This wasn't that. This was to me, it was like an old school, like 2011 LSU Alabama kind of game, like just 2 great defenses. And then, Clemson lost Antonio Williams, their top receiver, right at the beginning of the game. That obviously hurt. I am concerned about their running game. They didn't run the ball at all. But Clemson's defense is good. I mean, it's really good. But you know what? LSU's might be a step or 2 better.
Which is a big step from where they were 2 years ago, right? Like last year, Blake Baker comes in. I think they got better. What I thought really shined through, and again, Brian Kelly talked about this recently. They tripled the payroll from what they had last year, and a bunch of those guys. Patrick Payton looked much better last night than he did sometime last year at Florida State. I mean, he's been a really productive player. Mansour Delane looked like a real LSU DB, right? They took a couple of guys early in Brian Kelly's tenure who'd played at other places who were like not to the LSU standard, right? Corey Raymond came back, the DB coach who has, been around so many elite defensive backs. I thought Delane was a stud last night, one of the most impressive players that we saw in Saturday's action. I like that. And also, as you said, Antonio Williams was by far their leading receiver. He injured his hamstring early in the game. I think he was out after the first series. So I do think that kind of diminished things a little bit for Cade Klubnik. So on that front, yes, that would be for me. The way I look at Clemson, look, I picked Clemson to win the national title. They're in actually that second category for me because I am a little concerned. Is their O line good enough? I know they have some experience. Is their O line good enough? And how well will they run the ball? I still think they're a playoff team, but I got a little pause on them. But for me, the I'm not sweating this is actually was the biggest game of the day in terms of like eyeballs. And that was Texas. You know, here's the thing for me. Like I picked Ohio State to win the game because it was four new starters on the O line. It's Arch's first huge road test. It's in a really hostile environment. What I did not expect to happen was Steve Sarkisian to get out coached by Matt Patricia in Matt Patricia's first real college football game. Matt Patricia last coached in college football back on Paul Pasqualoni's staff in Syracuse. He was a grad assistant. Now, I think he's really, really smart, and obviously you don't spend that much time around Bill Belichick if you aren't. And they had to replace, I think, almost 8 or 9 guys who got drafted off the defense alone. Now, yeah, they had Caleb Downs, Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese. I remember James Laurinaitis texting me after Freaks List about, hey, Arvell Reese, he's a guy you guys got to be talking more about. And he definitely looked the part. The DBs look really good, by the way, for Ohio State. Having said all that, yes, it was a disappointing first big performance for Arch Manning. I would not bail off Texas or Arch. Again, new offensive line. What? What's wow? You would bail off Arch Manning?
I mean, I ended up writing 2 things about Arch Manning yesterday that we can get into. But I don't
let's get into it.
Am I teasing the next category here?
I know. Let's get into it here because for me, yeah, the first 3.5 quarters of the game, Arch looked a little tentative, and he looked, a half a tick off. But again, I think it's like your first game really ever road start. You don't have like a go-to guy. Matthew Golden, first round pick, is now with the Packers. You lost most of your offensive line. You're playing a really talented team with a defensive coordinator who there really isn't any college film of before. So I think there was a lot of reasons to be, this is why I expected them not to win. I just think that this is going to be a growing process for him. And do I think he's going to win the Heisman this year? No, but I think he's going to be really good. I think they did run the ball pretty well at times. And I think that'll only get better. I think their passing game will only get better. And let's be honest, this may be one of the most talented defenses in the country that they saw. And again, they saw it week 1 on the road. I think that's a lot to ask for a quarterback who, as much as, we can talk about how he's wired and how he's been raised, it's still human nature to get in the middle of that thing and be pressing. I mean, this is also the same team, by the way, that knocked them out of the playoffs last year.
So I'm not putting Texas as a team. I'm not jumping off the Texas bandwagon. I still think they're very good. They held Ohio State to 203 yards of offense. Maybe some of that was that once you got in the flow of the game and realized it was going to be a defensive struggle, that Ryan Day might have gotten a little conservative. But, Jeremiah Smith, again, for the second straight time against Texas, didn't have a great game. But in terms of Arch himself, Bruce, quick thing, you and I have talked about this in the past about criticizing college athletes, right? It was always a no-no to rip a college athlete. Then they started making money, and some people said, well, now they're fair game. And I wasn't quite there yet. I think Arch Manning, though, is in a different category. I mean, the guy was in 3 different national commercial campaigns during this game. At one point, he had shown in more commercials than he'd thrown completions. So I think we just got to be like, I'm just going to come out and say it. He was bad. It wasn't like, some growing pains, blah, blah, blah. He was bad. He was throwing the ball.
Do you just don't think he's going to be a good quarterback for them based
No,
on?
I'm going to put it in the a little bit concerned category. He's been look, everybody's going to say, the media overhyped him and blah, 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 blah. There was no avoiding that. He's a Manning. He was the number one recruit in the country. He was going to get hyped up like crazy. But I think at this point, we have to stop and say, wait. He started 3 games in college. 2 of them were against Mississippi State and ULM. So we finally see him against a really good team. And again, it wasn't like he had some good points and some bad points up until the second to last drive of the game where he finally, hit a couple big plays. It was bad. He was throwing the ball at receivers' feet. He was throwing the ball behind people. I thought he early in the game was kind of panicky under pressure. I do think you're right. Like I was skeptical of the Matt Patricia hire, but I saw Sark. Sark, by the way, is one of the best offensive play callers in the sport, right? So I saw people were killing him about the short yardage.
I think
calls.
Stu, on that point, I don't know the short yardage call, but the red zone and the one thing that I'm curious about a little bit here, and I spent the day watching football with Chris Peterson, and we talked a little bit about this on TV yesterday, was just for as well regarded Sark is and has been as a play caller, the red zone area, especially close, it's I think it's a little bit concerning because last year I think they ranked 54th in the country in red zone touchdown percentage. The year before that was like 120th. And I'd asked him, I said, is it a thing where sometimes they get too cute? One thing that, we talked about on the show yesterday at Fox, and Coach brought this up, was when you run, it's not like you have Jalen Hurts and it's the tush push, but when you run quarterback sneaks, how much do you actually really practice that in camp where it's like full go? It's like, sometimes, and maybe Texas did practice it a lot, but they did not get anywhere near where they needed him to go on that. And so I think that I'm sure that's everything's up for evaluation. That was the one area I think where you're like, they have to get much better at this because this is a part of their offense that's surprisingly suspect.
It's actually Sam Kahn had a really good story off the game yesterday about the things Texas did badly, and it's actually even worse than you think. Texas red zone success in the Steve Sarkisian era, red zone scoring percentage has gone from 4th in his first season, 4th nationally, to 19th to 91st to last year 102nd in the country. Now that didn't stop them from reaching the semifinals of the college football playoff, right? So it's not like this was a disaster, but it helped. I mean, it's a concern. It's a concern. I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, well, what was different in 2021 and 22 versus the past 2 seasons? And I have one theory.
They're in the Big 12.
Well, they were in the Big 12 in 2023 too. Bijan Robinson. It's a little easier your play calling is a lot. You have a lot more options in your play calling when you have Bijan Robinson, right? They've had decent running backs since then.
Stu, by the way, who was the quarterback for Texas like in 2020, 2021? 2022.
Good question. You're putting me on the spot.
But I think in that window, you had a really tough, he was kind of like, Sam Ehlinger was kind of Tebow-esque in terms of like.
Wait, was it still Sam Ehlinger at that point? In 2021?
In 2020?
In 2020, yes. He played his 4 years for. Can somebody in the comments help us out? He played all 4 seasons for Tom Herman. But 2021 was not Quinn Ewers yet. Who the heck was the quarterback?
Was it Hudson Card?
Oh, yeah. It was the Hudson Card, Casey Thompson year. You're right.
Okay, but so in both those guys can really run. Ewers was a really good quarterback. Ewers does not run well, right? So what I'm getting at is, and Sam really liked to run and could run, and he was strong. What I suspect you'll see more of is Arch can really run, and I think they will probably work more of that in as the season goes on. Again, I would not be panicked on Arch if I was a Texas fan. I get why people are probably freaked out. I certainly get why people are going to say that he's been way overhyped. I mean, there's no, as you said, there's no avoiding it not just because he's a Manning, the next Manning, because of who his uncles are, who his grandfather is, but also I think it's because of how much people inside Texas have talked about how good he is and all the things, all those things. But again, week 1, first big road test. I think there's reasons to kind of not
So I'm
freak
going to
out.
ask you a hypothetical here. I mean, as we know, right, the hit rate on 5-star quarterbacks is what, like 50%? You've written a
Not
lot
even.
about
It's
this,
like
right?
30%, Stu.
Even
It's
in Arch's
30%.
own class, 2 of the 5-stars are like one starting for UTEP now, and well, Jaden Rashada wasn't a 5-star; he's a 4-star. But he's at Sacramento State now. Um, so if his last name was Smith, and he goes out and plays like that yesterday, would we still be saying, "Oh, he's going to be fine"? You know, great lineage, da 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 da. That's all I'm saying. Not ready to sit here after 3 starts and say he's going to be a complete bust. No, I'm not. That would be dumb. That would be ridiculous. But I didn't see a number 1 pick in the draft yesterday. I saw a guy who really, really struggled. And so if he plays, obviously, if that's his ceiling, and I don't think it is, like
That's not
Texas
his
is in
ceiling.
big,
That's not his ceiling.
they're in big trouble. I just, my mild concern for Texas is so much has been riding on this guy. And if it turns out like he's just not there yet, in your Sark, like, do you have to, like, how do you adjust to that? I think their defense will give them a chance to reach the playoff and go far, no matter who the quarterback is. But national championship aspirations really were tied to Arch being an elite
Let's pump the
quarterback.
brakes on your angst too. I'm just going to say this. He threw a pick at one point. Matthews picked him off. It was like a deep out across the field. That's a throw maybe he can get away with against. Maybe did get away against Louisiana Monroe. He's not getting away with it against Ohio State or against elite teams. And I think what will help him is now to see it full contact live. What I can do, what I really can't try, and those things. I mean, very few quarterbacks. Josh Allen can probably get away with that throw. He's not Josh Allen. So I think that's going to help him is just here's what I can do. Here's what I probably shouldn't try. And then they kind of work through the timing. Again, also, as I said, 4 new starters on the O-line. I think they had 3 false starts. That doesn't help. Again, I think there was probably enough blame to go around. But if I was a Texas fan, I wouldn't be stressed. Honestly, I wouldn't.
Okay, so that Arch was my overreaction. I'm a little concerned about. What's yours?
The one I'm a little concerned about is I picked Clemson to win the national title, and yes, Antonio Williams was not there. It was just the offensive line was not great. I thought LSU was just hats off to Blake Baker, especially the defensive coordinator. It's year 2 there. They look really good. I know they added a bunch of guys from the portal. Harold Perkins looked like Harold Perkins of freshman days. That was, he got after them, especially right down to the last offensive play Clemson had. I'm not bailing off them, but I am like, that's a pick I might want to have back just because, man, the run game. And again, they have young running backs now. Phil Maffa's gone, and we're a ways away from Will Shipley, and we're certainly a really ways away from the Trevor Lawrence group. But I still think they have the firepower. I still think their defense is going to be really good. What I thought, their defense was not as good as I was expecting last night. I expected Peter Woods inside the middle of the defense to be much more disruptive. I didn't think he was. The part with LSU that I was really impressed by and curious about was it wasn't just can they run the football? It was will they run the football? Because in the past, Joe Sloan, the offensive coordinator, he's really liked to throw it, and obviously they threw the heck out of it a couple of years ago when you had the Heisman winner and those great receivers. But last night, I think they had over 30 carries. Caden Durham ran the ball well. It wasn't like I think he was like 17 for 75, which is like they committed to the run. And they did enough, I feel like, to complement it. I thought Garrett Nussmeier, hey, in our Heisman draft, he was my first pick. I feel really good about that. I mean, he looked terrific. I thought Garrett Nussmeier in the big stage games was the most impressive. That's a really tough place to play. And he shined in the second half. Didn't take any sacks in the second half. Clemson didn't sack him in the second half. Didn't have any turnovers. I thought that was like an A-plus performance by him. Again, I think Clemson will get a lot better. But we'll see. So let's
Yeah.
get to the
Well, let me just
elephant in
say
the
on
room.
Clemson real quick. The biggest concern I had was exactly what played out. When I saw that, in preseason that their number one running back was going to be a converted receiver, Adam Fuller, who did score their only touchdown.
And look good doing it. He looked really
Yeah,
physical.
but they ran for I think around 50 yards on the whole night. When we got used to and when Clemson was peak Clemson, Travis Etienne, like running backs and receivers galore, especially receivers. I mean, what an assembly line of receivers they had. And where they've really trailed off the last few years is they just don't have a lot of elite playmakers on offense.
I
And
still think they have it, Stu. Those three receivers are really good. They missed the most
they
productive
missed the
one.
best one.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I think they can certainly win the ACC with those guys, right? But you said you picked them to win the national championship, which I was a little skeptical of, to say the least. And I don't see that happening. Now, it would be a totally respectable season if, for instance, they reach the semifinals of the CFP, and I think that's doable. But I don't think they're on the level of I mean, I don't think they're on the level of Ohio State for one, and it's not like I was picking Ohio State to win the national title, but they look like that kind of team yesterday. For this last category that we came up with, I
This is
have a
the
feeling
elephant in
we
the
might
room.
have the
I feel
same
like.
answer. Yeah.
Yeah,
You
you
want
and
to
I.
say it in three?
Three, two,
Team
one.
Alabama.
Alabama. Yeah, look, you and I both really respect and like Kalen DeBoer. Thought he did an amazing job pretty much everywhere he's been. The part that watching it, and I was just down in Tuscaloosa 2 weeks ago. Now, I will couch that by saying the guy who was the most impressive player on the offense when I was down there that day was Jam Miller. He's probably not, he didn't play yesterday. He's probably not going to be back till the Georgia game, maybe if they're lucky, right? And
Hmm.
with a collarbone issue. Tim Keenan's their defensive leader and their best D lineman. He was not there, and it showed. Having said all that, though, here's what gives me pause. Right when you looked at what you were watching, and first off, like hats off to Mike Norvell. He made some really good
Yeah.
hires in the off
Let's
season. Right, like just
Before
quickly
we pile on
on
Alabama, let's give some proper credit
yeah.
to what a remarkable 180.
And look, he brought in his old buddy and mentor, Gus Malzahn, who knows the running game probably as well as anybody, right? And we saw it. I think, they went from like one of the worst rushing teams in the country to what looks like they may be one of the best, right? Thomas Castellanos, who called his shot. Nick Saban can't save them. Well, you know what? Print your T-shirts, Thomas. I hope hope you got some got the BC business degree. You should make a lot of money off
I
that.
hope BC does well this year, because otherwise Bill O'Brien's going to be taking a lot of heat for benching that guy.
That guy, he's got some of the Diego Pavia kind of aura about him, and I felt like you could sense that they were feeding off his energy, right? I thought Norvell and Malzahn did a really good job. They mixed in. They have one of the legit fastest players in college football, Micaiah Danzy. He was one of my freaks list guys, who's like the ACC record holder, I think, in the 400 meters. That guy can fly, and it looked like it on the touchdown run he had. And I thought they were two things that would give me a lot of concern if I was Alabama, which was one, Florida State looked faster, and two, Florida State looked more physical. And the latter part is the really concerning part. Like, I really think very highly of Kalen DeBoer. Coaches are like, you can have this where a guy can be a great coach at this place or that place. Sometimes fit is really important, and timing is really important. And I'm not saying that, like, if I'm Greg Byrne, I'm trying to rally money. Greg Byrne, the AD at Alabama, I'm trying to rally money to figure out if I could do a buyout or anything like that. It's way too early for that. But you look at like the last 5 or 6 games they played away from Tuscaloosa, they just look like they are a little bit sleepwalking and they're on their heels. And that's the part where, like, they got to figure that out really fast. Like, I'm not like, oh, Ty Simpson can't be a good quarterback, or, when Jam Miller gets back, I think that'll help. When Keenan gets back, that will help. But they just, like, the energy is different, and that's the part I would be really worried about if I was an Alabama fan.
Kalen DeBoer's biggest problem is that he was already going to be held to an almost impossible standard by being the guy to come after Nick Saban. And this has just been a disastrous start to his tenure. Disastrous. He is 4-5 over his last 9 games against Power 4 teams. And like you said, I mean, they've just been totally outclassed in a lot of those.
And by the way, a lot of those teams have been unranked. Michigan was a mess, for most of last year. Oklahoma was a mess last year. Vanderbilt was improved,
I should
but it's
also
still
note
Vanderbilt.
that the Vanderbilt game was at least like kind of a shootout. In those 4 losses since then, they've been held to 17 points or less. And Kalen DeBoer is supposed to be, if you know him from, like, if you remember his Washington teams, right? Offensive guru. And so, look, I will give anybody a mulligan for their first season at a new job. And so I gave him a mulligan for last year. You can't start out the next season laying an egg like this. And so what I've seen in all my time covering this sport is when a new coach, and especially one succeeding a great coach, gets in a hole like this, it becomes almost impossible to dig out because the fans are done with you already. Like I don't know if that's truly the case. It'll seem that way on Feinbaum Monday. Like, how do you, at this point, like, Alabama has to turn around and have an amazing season for people to forgive him for the way it is started. And from the first series, it was clear Florida State was a better team. There was nothing fluky about that. A team that went 2-10 last year was clearly the better team than Alabama, a preseason top 10 team. So that's rough. There's no way around it. By the way, I seem to be one of the only people in college football who likes the transfer portal. I think it's been, and I think
No, I don't think that's the case. I think a lot of people like it. I think the things that
I don't think fans like the transfer portal.
I think fans get frustrated by it. I think honestly fans dislike, not all, we can't say in absolutes, but I think fans, a lot of them are more dislike NIL than they dislike.
Well, I think they're linked, and I think at this point in time, I could be wrong. Maybe people can chime in on the comments. Most people don't have a problem with guys making money. They have a problem
as
with
an example. LSU doesn't win a national title, doesn't have like the greatest season in their history if the portal didn't give them, let them get Joe Burrow. If the portal,
when I say portal, I should be clear. It got a lot. What's the word? It got a lot more divisive when guys could play right away. I mean, we accepted that grad transfers could play right away, like Joe Burrow. But once these guys could start flipping from team to team to team, I mean, it's tough. It's tough when your best players get poached away, right? But in terms of the sport as a whole, right, I don't have a stake in any one team. The fact that if this were the old days, if you will, right, a team that reached the depths that Florida State did last year, that would be a 3 to 4 year rebuilding project, right? But in this case, Mike Norvell basically just flushed and started over. 10 of their 11 starters on offense were newcomers. One of them was a freshman. And boom, like, if you're a Florida State fan, you don't have to sit around and be hopeless for 3 years. Indiana last year, transfer portal, Kurt Signetti, boom, instant turnaround. And I think that's great. Like, I think it's great when everybody has hope. Now, the flip side of it is you can get rated in the transfer portal and be really bad. But, I think we both agree we like chaos in college football. And this can only contribute to the chaos, to the unpredictability. I have to own up to, you regret your Clemson national title pick.
I'm not freaked out about it. I'm just
I regret on this podcast the other day saying I would, if Florida State went 9-3, I would, do yours and Ralph's laundry at the national title game or whatever I volunteered.
Well, what you said was, when we asked you, what do you think is more likely to happen? Them go 9-3 or 3-9, and you said 3-9.
Yeah, whoops. Now, again, you talk about overreact. They're not going to go 3-9, right? But like, there have been a lot of week 1 games where you're like, oh my gosh, this team looks amazing, and it turns out the team they played wasn't very good.
This was the Notre Dame. Are you saying it's like the Notre Dame Texas game that Joe Tess was doing?
Honestly, it was a lot, and it was a little bit like, an inverse here. The Florida State Georgia Tech game last year to open the season, where it was like, oh my gosh, Georgia Tech's just running over Florida State. What's going on here? This year, Florida State just pummeled and ran over Alabama. Like, if my takeaway from that game is that Alabama might be in for a rough season.
I don't disagree, but I want to keep it on Florida State for a second. Now, seeing what you saw, right? Granted, it was a home game. It was kind of sloppy conditions and rain and everything like that, but both teams had to play in those conditions. If I told you we could Men in Black stick the foolish stuff you said a couple of days ago about Florida State, give me a prediction now what you think they will do, not what you think they can do. Like, are they a 10-win team? I mean, Castellanos with the speed they have, you know, props to our friend Herb Hand, who's well-traveled
Oh yeah.
O-line coach. He's there. He's been with Gus Malzahn. Like they know what they're doing, right? Um, I remember, a quick thing before I get your answer. Coach Pete said something yesterday. He remembered going to Tulsa back in the day to go, their staff clinicked with Malzahn's staff, and he goes, "Yeah, there was a young guy in the back of the room seemed to have all the answers." And I was like, "Who is that guy?" And that was Mike Norvell.
Mm.
And so, like, point is, those guys have been together for a long time. They've maybe been apart for a couple of years, but I feel like that definitely helps, when you're putting the pieces back together. It's not just the transfer portal. Remember, he made some tough decisions, firing some good coaches and good coordinators because they had to, like, for optics and for all sorts of reasons, you had to shake it up. And he did that. Now those guys got paid handsomely to go away. But I think those things, like, came together really well. And they're a team that, again, here's my overreaction, but I would not at all be surprised if the team we watch, as long as, like, Castellanos stays healthy, that they could be a playoff contender because that fits with the identity. And I just think the offense is going to be a problem for people.
I mean, I think Clemson's still the class of the ACC. We haven't seen Miami as of this recording. We haven't seen Miami yet. They're playing in a little bit, but is there anybody after that you would say, "Oh, Florida State's not going to be able to handle them"? No, I mean they can contend in that conference. But again, like,
So give me your
just
pick right
pump the
now.
brakes a little bit in case it turns out Alabama's terrible.
What is the prediction right now? What is the regular season record
I'll
of
go
Florida
9-3.
State?
I'll go 9-3 and do your laundry.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want you to do my laundry. I've seen how you do. I've seen how you try to iron a shirt. You don't need to be doing
I'll make
anybody's laundry.
Starbucks runs. I'm a man of
Better,
my word.
better.
Let's cast the net here a little bit. Obviously there were 3 games that really were the games on Saturday, but let's cast, obviously a lot of teams. We got to see their first impressions, especially if you go back to Thursday and Friday. What's one team that really impressed you?
Like, kind of away from the big 3 games, you're asking me?
Yeah. And you can go Thursday, Friday if you want.
Yeah, like, I gotta say this. When watching, we're in studio and it was Baylor and Auburn, and I'll be honest, I did not know what to expect from Hugh Freeze's team. Jackson Arnold, who took a beating last year, quite honestly, at Oklahoma, former 5-star quarterback from Texas, goes up there. Felt, there was a lot of things that went wrong around him. And you wondered about his confidence. And some of the chatter coming out of it was like, okay, we know they got really talented receivers, and I've heard that their offensive line should be one of the better ones they've had there in a long time. But it's like Freeze is coming off back-to-back losing seasons, and he's got Lane Kiffin trolling him on social media at every turn. Jackson Arnold's running ability was like a revelation. I knew he could run, but, like, he looked like he was sped up compared to other
Mm-hmm.
people on the field, and they looked really good. Again, this is Dave Aranda's defense you're going up against, and this is Dave Aranda. Like, I'm not saying that Auburn's going to make the playoff, but if he builds off that, you got Cam Coleman, Eric Singleton Jr. when he gets, he wasn't 100%. I think he's a dynamic playmaker. We saw what he did at Georgia Tech last year. They have athletes on defense, a lot of them. Keldrick Falk is a dominant defensive lineman. As much as we just talked about Alabama and some real concerns, I think Auburn felt like a little bit of a revelation with the Freeze's quarterbacks always find a way. Guys who you don't think can run way better in his offense. That's been a thing for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But Jackson Arnold looked like he again, if his confidence keeps growing, he's super talented. Like Coach Pete was saying to me, like, a couple of years ago when they were all at Elite 11 and he was one of the coaches, he said the most impressive quarterback who was there to him was Jackson Arnold. And then obviously last year, people were bailing on him. I'm very interested to see how he builds off of week 1 on the road against Dave Aranda.
Jackson Arnold was one of the 5 stars in Arch Manning's class that I was thinking of. I think the first 2 seasons of Hugh Freeze at Auburn, he just had the wrong quarterback. He hitched his wagon to Peyton Thorne, and he was just not the guy to fit that offense. So, yeah, it looks like Jackson Arnold is kind of perfectly suited for that QB run game. Now, he didn't do much in the passing game, but they've got receivers, right? So I'm not too worried about that. The other thing you would, if you want to be a little cautious, is Sawyer Robertson threw for a lot of yards on them. Like, it wasn't like they had a great game defensively.
He's going to throw for, I think he's going to throw for a lot of yards on a lot of people. Josh Cameron's is one of the best receivers in the country. He's a unique weapon. They're an air raid style. Like, they're going to throw for a lot of yards on a lot of people, I think, this year.
So my answer to this team that really impressed me, Utah. And I think when we had Ralph on and did his playoff formula, I put Utah in there, but I had high hope. I thought it was very promising what Kyle Whittingham went and did in the offseason, and basically saying, I like New Mexico's offense. I'm bringing the offensive coordinator and the quarterback here. But yeah, I mean, they just stomped UCLA and Nico 43-10. And Devin Dampier was 21 of 25 for 206 yards and 2 touchdowns, and ran 16 times for 87 yards. Like, it was basically like one of those situations where it was exactly how you thought it might go. In fact, even better. So if that's what it's going to look like, and look, UCLA, another team that could be terrible, and you pair that with a Kyle Whittingham defense, yeah, that team can win the Big 12, right? And it was so uncharacteristic the last couple of years where they really were mediocre, and last year 5-7. And I saw a team there that, yeah, this looks like a big bounce back season for them.
Yeah, I mean, look, we know they have an elite offensive line. Spencer Fano might be the best offensive lineman in college football. When you watch Dampier, he looks like a running back. Like, there's a bunch of quarterbacks who can really run. They don't physically look like, in terms of how they're built, he looks like he would be a tailback at a lot of places. Now, he can throw, but the other thing was they were like in third and manageable like all night. I think they were like 14 of 16 on third down. It was crazy how efficient they were. Again, I think some of this is UCLA is a pretty mediocre, like, they'll be lucky to have a winning record. And I think you're also getting Nico is going to, he didn't have spring football. I think a lot of stuff is, on the fly there. There were some good moments for him. He was honestly the best.
Nico wasn't the problem for them.
Yeah. I think it's almost everything else around him was. And we'll see how that kind of progresses. Again, UCLA looked really bad in the first half of last season too, and then they ended up being 5-7. They turned out to be better than probably a lot of folks thought. But again, I'm with you. Jason Beck, who a lot of people don't know about, that's the offense coordinator who's been bounced around quite a bit. One of the fun facts who should be on his baseball card, if he had one, was he was really the first guy to believe in Lenoris Sellers. I mean, he was committed to him both at Virginia and Syracuse, and then when Beck ended up going to New Mexico with Bronco Mendenhall, they did well. We were talking about this last night in the green room about especially Dampier, and I said the thing that I was like, whoa, who's this? And we were both talking about, like, last year they played Arizona before people realized Arizona was going to really stink last year. And he kind of gave them fits. He ran wild in that game. You're like, okay, this guy in this offense is a problem for people. And like you said, and this is similar situation to what Oklahoma did by taking John Mateer and Ben Arbuckle, the offensive coordinator. You plug this in, it's different than, we really like this quarterback. Now we're going to have to make everybody else kind of, learn him as he learns them. This is like you got a ready-made plug and play, like catcher, pitcher, battery, and it looked really good. I agree with you.
And Devin Dampier, I said people are going to get to see me mispronounce names in real time here. He was really exciting to watch last year at New Mexico, but he was like a 58% passer. So much more efficient here against UCLA. And now we bring back a little segment that we did, I believe, every week during the season last year. And that is player who most impressed me.
All right. Who you got, Stu? Why don't you start off? I went first the last one.
Haynes King, who is not exactly a new guy on the scene here. But I feel like, and Haynes King is Georgia Tech's quarterback, if you don't know, I feel like he's just chronically underappreciated. And I wonder how different that would be if they had pulled out that 7 overtime game against Georgia. They go and play Dion in Colorado the other on Thursday night, and they couldn't stop him. Dion said afterward he looked like a Heisman contender. Not the first time I would say that he's done that. I mean, I feel like a recurring theme, honestly, this weekend. A lot of impressive quarterbacks in the run game. A lot of really good dual threat quarterbacks this weekend, and he kind of started it off. I think Georgia Tech. I should have mentioned them when you were asking like how Florida State can do. Like I think Georgia Tech can definitely be a factor in the ACC.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you watch that Georgia marathon game around Thanksgiving weekend, I think you and I both have a lot of respect, for the job that they've done there and what he does in the run game. You got an old O-line guy who runs the program, and I feel like they take on his image. For me, it's a quarterback who was like a big name, a big name recruit. He actually started his career at Alabama, but like Julian Sayin was the other quarterback in the matchup in the Texas Ohio State game, and he actually played less than Arch going into this. I thought was really impressive. Again, Texas had the defense that was the headliner defense in that, given all the guys, Colin Simmons coming back, Anthony Hill, you got like really good DBs, and it started out a little rocky, not from really Sayan's standpoint, but like the first 5 passes he throws, 3 of them are dropped. Three
Mm-hmm.
of them. Max Clare, their terrific Purdue transfer tight end, he drops one. And then Jeremiah Smith drops 2 passes. I don't think Jeremiah Smith dropped 2 passes all last year. And he just kept on playing. He was on the money. He was really poised. They didn't throw, as you said, they were conservative, I think, in how they called the game to some degree. He gave his receivers a chance. Carnell Tate, if you're the other receiver and Jeremiah Smith's there, you're probably not going to get as much attention as you deserve. He might be like the second or third best receiver in the country. Like the touchdown catch he made was a huge play where he double catches it. You see his concentration, you see his physicality to make that play. But I thought Sam looked really sharp. And again, that was a largely overhauled offensive line. A bunch of guys moved on. The running backs, again, if there was one thing I would be a little concerned about if I was an Ohio State fan more than anything else is just the drop off going from Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. And, CJ Donaldson's a good power back. James Peoples, I know people there have been, high on him, but Sam doesn't have the running backs to lean on that Will Howard did. But I thought Sam really shined didn't get down and just kind of kept plowing through it. And again, one of the things we talked about a lot, having seen Julian Sayin at the Elite 11, he was the guy who was very impressive there because his temperament, and he's just kind of a cool customer. Came in, I think, in the same class as Dylan Raiola, who was the headliner there, and everybody else, all those other quarterbacks, it looked like they were like gripping the football tighter to just kind of measure up to Dylan, who's a big, physical, strong guy. And Sayin was just really letting it fly, and just didn't seem like he was just trying to squeeze the air out of the ball. And I think you saw that kind of demeanor shine through in a big, bright stage game.
I thought you were going to say a different Big Ten quarterback. In fact, a quarterback on the other side with Ohio State's biggest rival.
Yeah, Bryce Underwood was really impressive. We're watching the game in the green room, and there's stuff. They're not even like long completions, and you're watching the off-platform throws. Like he is an elite athlete who is a big physical dude. You saw him like blocking on a touchdown run. Not that you ever like. I would be surprised if he does not turn out to be a big star at Michigan. Like again, it was New Mexico, and look, I think Jason X, one of the best like off the radar coaches, and they gave them a game for a little while and were competitive. But I think just some of the stuff you saw from Bryce Underwood last night was like, whoa, you can see why the recruiting guys had him so highly ranked. There's like, some of, again, just the combination of his size and athleticism, but also some of the stuff is like those middle infielder kind of throws that just gets rid of the ball from like positions and body positions and angles that make him pretty special with all the other stuff. Marlon Klein, who was a freaks list guy I had, European tight end who's super explosive athlete, had a really good game. He's trying to replace Colston Loveland, and they could really use him to be a difference maker. I mean, again, Justice Haynes, Alabama could have used him last night. He broke a big run. They got a big game next week. It's not a great week 2. You got Cyhawk and you got Oklahoma and Michigan. But if I was a Michigan fan, aside from what happened in Columbus, I'd feel very encouraged by what I saw from my young quarterback. And in a way, I'd actually feel really good that Ohio State won that game, because I just think it helps the Big Ten to hold serve against Texas.
I think Michigan will have a much more dynamic offense than they did last year when it was so miserable. So we're going to close out with shoutouts. This is where we get a chance to often hit some less obvious teams, players, coaches. What you got?
All right. So this didn't happen on Saturday. It happened Thursday night. But Tarleton State, which was a Division II program not that long ago, like 5 or 6 years ago.
4 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. Todd Whitten, who played so long ago, he was a New England Patriot like long before Belichick. It was like in the mid 80s, I think he was signed there. 60-year-old guy who has done a really good job there for a long time. Tarleton State beat Army. Army, who's has been really, really good under Monken, and they beat him in double overtime. Huge win. I think they got $250,000 to play that game. Shout out to Tarleton State in Stephenville, Texas. A lot of great football players have come from there. Big win for Tarleton State.
That was maybe one of the biggest, maybe the biggest stunner of the weekend, because Army's coming off an 11-win season, an AAC championship. You don't expect them to be the team that loses to an FCS opponent. If it's okay, I'd like to already make an exception to the format in week 1. I'd like to do 2 shout-outs. They're not exactly going to be under-the-radar people. First of all, our old friend Kirk Ferentz tied Woody Hayes' record for most wins as a Big Ten coach, his 205th win yesterday against Maine, which means he goes into Cyhawk with an opportunity to break that record. And of course, we can't conclude this podcast without mentioning Lee Corso. We did talk about him with Ralph quite a bit this week, but how awesome that on his final day as a game day analyst, he got all his picks right. He got Ohio State, he got Florida State, he got LSU, but also somebody up there was smiling. All 6 schools that Lee Corso either played for or coached won their game Saturday. Florida State, Maryland, Navy, Louisville, Indiana, and NIU. So I don't know. I as much as we talked about it heading up to it, I don't think you could have asked for a better send-off than he got on Saturday.
Yeah, hats off to him. You're right. Especially his alma mater doing what they did. Oh man, that had to make him feel good.
All right, a couple quick programming notes about the Audible. We will be back Tuesday morning. Ralph will be with us. We'll get a chance to talk about Notre Dame, Miami, Virginia Tech, South Carolina, and of course, Bill Belichick's debut against TCU. And for longtime listeners of the Audible, we have gotten a lot of comments in the last, ever since we relaunched. What happened to the old theme song? Well, good news. If you enjoy the old theme song that we had for 8 years, it's a real song, and it's called Dangerous by Kevin and the Octaves, whose guitarist is Jamie Mandel. Spotify. Yeah, go on Spotify. You can listen. I don't know that anybody's ever heard the full song, the lyrics and everything. You can go download that, stream that anytime you want. We will be back on Tuesday. We will see you then.